He turned water into wine, I turned whiskey into songs. Too many second chances, too many too far gones. Gave me grace along the way, took my heart and led me home. Don't you see? It's a God thing for me. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Heartland Journal podcast with Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community and lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with special guest John Strand. Before entering the civil rights arena, John Strand built his career independently in a highly competitive world. As an actor, writer, model, and professional spokesperson, he learned to negotiate, compete, and perform at a high level without political protection. Amid COVID lockdowns and BLM violence, he organized and led a freedom rally, which President Trump tweeted to support, and then became the creative director for America's Frontline Doctors during one of the most polarizing periods in modern American history, often in the face of intense political media and institutional pressure. It demanded courage, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to principle. He was sentenced to nearly 3 years and spent 366 days in a high-security federal prison, including extended isolation conditions that violated both U.S. regulations and recognized international human rights standards. In 2022, he made a deliberate decision to leave California and move to Florida. His Christian faith continues to shape his public service and leadership. Now called the Maverick Conservative, John Strand is running to restore accountability to government, affordability to everyday life, and security to a nation that must once again honor its constitutional foundations. Let's meet John Strand. Hello, Mr. Strand. How are you today?
I'm awesome, Steve. How's it going?
It's going
really
great.
To be here with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you out there in the hot heat of Florida knocking doors right now? Where are you calling from?
Yes, calling from Naples, Florida, and that's actually exactly what we are doing. We are hitting the streets. It's getting real hot, as it does in Southwest Florida, but we like it that way. Yeah, we're collecting signatures as we speak. So John Strand, Patriot for Congress, running to reclaim the Republic for the American people, collecting signatures to get on the ballot the old-fashioned way. We're in a crazy primary with a lot of people running, but we're the only ones actually gathering the signatures from the voters in the streets to be on the ballot. So you caught us right in the thick of the campaign.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time away just to do this. We really appreciate it. I've been wanting to do this for a long, long time. Before January 6th, which will go down in infamy and it's going to always be with us and you and your reputation, but you built a career as a model and a spokesman. How did a life focused on image and media prepare or maybe even fail to prepare you for the reality of political activism?
What a great question. And I think it certainly prepared me in many positive ways. I don't think there was a failure there. Although, of course, a lot of people love to say, "What's an actor doing running for public office?" Which I guess is a legitimate question. That's fine.
They said that about Ronald Reagan too. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So it's always funny. But I've had a very interesting life arc and trajectory that's prepared me for a lot of things. I never expected prison to be on that list, or running for office for that matter. But from prison to politics is the storyline now, and it's pretty interesting. So my background, I've been an artist my whole life, and that's because I had an amazing family that provided me the support and the foundation to explore such things. So I'm a proud Italian American born in California to a father who served in the U.S. Navy. His father served in the Marine Corps. So there's a proud patriotic tradition of service there, and grew up all over the country with my dad being in the military until he retired from that portion and went to private service. But my mom and dad sacrificed a lot to homeschool all 6 of their kids from an early age. And so I was raised on a rock solid foundation of Judeo-Christian values and that freedom of homeschooling to explore creativity, industry, community, and beauty. and almost got into politics really early. I was working a full campaign cycle for Kevin Lundberg, who was a first-time candidate that's at the time and eventually became state senator in the state of Colorado. And that was in high school. And then I went a different direction with my life, started recording and touring with my brother in an indie rock band, and then was scouted into acting and modeling work over the years.
Hmm.
So I was doing that for some time and carving out a niche and on an upward trajectory, I think, towards a successful career. And I was very excited about it. Worked really hard for a long time without any sponsors or special interest support to carve out a career path in the media and entertainment field, which is very difficult, as you know.
Yeah.
But I was working hard at that. Had spent some time overseas as well, and then COVID.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Boom! Like that just
let's not jump that far
changed
ahead
everything.
yet, but we're going to definitely delve into that. So we already invoked, the great Ronald Reagan, who was an actor and president of the Screen Actors Guild, and then went on to be a wonderful two-term president, and a Republican, former Democrat. The other person who your trajectory sort of resembles would be Martin Luther King, who did do some prison time and went on
Right.
to activism, not in elected office, unlike Ronald Reagan, who was elected to governor and then president, of course. Um, do you see any resemblance there? He wasn't an actor turned activist. He was an activist turned, a preacher turned activist. But do you see any similarities between his civil rights struggles and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, it's quite interesting you make that comparison. The book behind me on the screen here is the book that I wrote in prison as a political prisoner, which Martin Luther King Jr. was as well, of course. So in the book Patriot Plea, I actually reference the fact that, in a sense, I felt I was standing on the shoulders of giants such as Martin Luther King Jr. As I was advocating for civil liberties and pushing back on government oppression and political oppression. And ironically, I was arrested, assaulted by an FBI SWAT team of 20 agents in tactical gear, machine guns. They pulverized my front door with a battering ram, red laser dots on my chest, sort of like a scene out of a Jason Bourne movie. And I make a joke. I almost half expected, someone to yell "cut" during this FBI raid and say like, "Oh no, it was your audition for the next Bourne flick." Be like, wouldn't that be nice?
Mhm.
But no, this was no joke. It was a nightmare, a living nightmare. And that arrest took place on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January
Wow.
18th
They
of
didn't take the federal
2021.
holiday off. What's up with that?
Yeah, yeah. The God has a peculiar sense of irony, I found, so I traced that through the book as well. But
Wow.
yeah,
I had a feeling there was some trajectory there that had to make sense.
yeah.
And so what made you decide Republican was the way to go? It's a lot easier to win as a Democrat, I find, especially in Florida and Colorado.
Well, not in Florida these days, but certainly in California and Colorado, it would be easier to win as a Democrat. I've never been a Democrat, never would have conceived of such a thing. I was homeschooled and did have a solid education in the basics and in the history of our country. So I understand the Democrat Party was largely centered around slavery and keeping people in oppression based
And
on the
I meant California, by the way, not
yes,
Florida.
yes,
Of
yes.
course, it's become
The
a bastion, but
yeah, totally. Yeah, no, the Republican Party, of course, was started to push back on slavery and set all people free and to pursue republicanism or a Republican form of government. And of course, many folks don't actually know this because sadly we've lost a lot of basic education and people don't even read the Constitution. But the Constitution guarantees a Republican form of government to all American citizens. That is a non-negotiable feature of the entire construct of the entire American project. Another thing that people often don't realize is that the Republican form of government was first introduced millennia, thousands of years ago, by the great Moses, the prophet leader of the Israelite nation when God first formed that nation and then led them out of slavery from Egypt. And Moses' father-in-law Jethro saw Moses toiling to try to manage this society, this nation that was growing larger and larger, several million people, and Moses was in charge of everything. And Jethro said, "You're never going to make it, brother. So you need to get smart and find some men of courage
outsource
and
this.
faith and integrity. Yeah, find some leaders to be in charge of thousands and hundreds and tens of people. So a Republican representational form of government. And I think that's very, very interesting. He said, you need to find men of good character who hate bribes. who hate that was his qualification. And I think that is very illuminating when we look at our current Republican form of government, specifically Congress and the leaders that are supposed to be representatives of the people.
That's right.
Yeah, if we got rid of those who hate bribes, I think we'd have an empty Capitol building.
They also like to forget that the name at the bottom of the Emancipation Proclamation is Abraham Lincoln, who founded the Republican Party specifically to emancipate those slaves. So
That's
that's a
right.
little rewriting of history once in a while. Yeah. You've described your pardon as a moment of restoration, but also said you were, quote, reduced to a pulse in solitary. Has that version of yourself, the one who endured the darkness, become the core identity of you and your campaign, or something you've moved beyond?
Well, the first thing I want to just clarify is that I actually wasn't pardoned technically. And that's due to a very interesting, unique part of my J6 story. There were a handful of folks that didn't take plea deals, but there were almost 1,600 people indicted for J6. And a federal indictment for January 6th, I call it institutionalized defamation. So it's defamation backed by the power of the federal government. So just being indicted completely destroyed people's lives, even if they didn't walk into a prison cell for a day. And almost half of them did spend time in prison. But most people took plea deals because they were facing 20-year felonies and insane charges that would completely destroy their life, even beyond the defamation factor, which was already enough. I think most of the folks that did refuse a plea deal and go to trial had a plea deal that still included felonies. So it was six of one, half dozen of the other. I don't actually know of other cases. There may be a few, but I'm not aware of them, where a J6er was facing a 20-year felony and a completely ruined life, and then was given a single misdemeanor plea deal to make it all go away. So with those options on the table, I mean, pretty much no one would turn that down. Everyone in my life told me to take the plea deal under those circumstances. They knew it was false. They knew I wanted to fight against it, but they said, this just isn't smart. It's not rational under the circumstances. It's a rigged system, a DC jury. It's corrupt. And you'd be better served taking the plea deal to stay out of that system and that devastation and live to fight another day. So that was a rational perspective on it. But here's the thing, Steve. I just truly believe there's never a right time to do the wrong thing. That's the core of my ethic, and that's definitely the core of my campaign. But before politics or a campaign or anything else, I just think if you don't understand what's right and wrong, and you don't make a choice to commit to what's right because it's right, not because of how it's going to work out for you in any given moment, you'll just work your way down a path of expediency. And again, looking at Congress, a lot of those folks, I think, sincerely want to do the right thing and had a heart to change or to help the American people when they head that direction. But then what happens every time we send anyone up there? The same thing over and over. It's the same story repeated 1,000 times endlessly. And it's those small little choices we make to justify not committing to what's right. So I turned down a single misdemeanor plea deal, knowing I'd get convicted and go to prison. It got even worse from there. I never could have imagined what they did to me in isolation. But the bottom line is that because I didn't take the plea, I was able to appeal. And then I won with the Fisher decision at the Supreme Court. So fully vindicated by the Supreme Court. And then after I was released, one of only two people released before President Trump returned to office, the DOJ at the time tried to squeeze me further to drop the rest of my appeal. And I said, have you met me before? So I fought them all the way until we vacated all five charges. So I'm not pardoned. I'm exonerated within the legal system without any record whatsoever.
Wow. All right. I'm glad you clarified that. That
Yeah,
makes it even more impressive. Many former J6 prisoners I've interviewed, about eight now with you, they struggle to reintegrate quietly. You chose the opposite path, public office. That's about as loud as you're ever going to get. Nick
right.
Searcy, he did two documentaries, so give him credit. That's also about as loud as you're ever going to get. And he's been on twice, and he lost his agent over the deal. They, just ideology in Hollywood not being pro
Certainly.
patriot. What does your decision to run for Congress reveal about how you believe suffering should be redeemed or utilized?
Great question as well, Steve. There's a chapter in my book, chapter 18 is called Triumph in Suffering. And that chapter chronologically covers the portion of my time in prison after getting out of isolation. And so I was still in a very difficult, miserable situation under awful conditions, but slightly less terrible. And I had a chance to process what had happened to me over the first half of my time in prison, and also really think and pray and just struggle through a continued period of suffering and misery that I did not know when or how it would end, because they sent me away for years. And I thought a lot about the redemption of suffering. I also got a chance to read Dr. Viktor Frankl's book, finally, which I'd always intended to read, Man's Search for Meaning. Incredible, and I reference that a lot in Patriot Plea. Just a reminder for folks, johnstrand.com/book will take you right to Patriot Plea, and it really is a shocking story, and I think a powerful opportunity to really ignite the nation and cause a revival in the Church of America, and in the streets of America, just in terms of reminding us our duty and our opportunity as American citizens and what that means for each and every single one of us, all 300 million plus American citizens. So redeeming suffering is one of the most important questions to wrestle with as a human, even if you've never had any connection to J6 or ever gone to prison or anything crazy like that. All humans encounter suffering. It's part of life. So it's a great question you're asking. And I didn't intend to reintegrate post my J6 experience in a loud way per se. Although certainly my personality and the way that God has built me is to be a bold and front leading person. And over the last 6 years, particularly since COVID, I was bold in my own way as an actor and model in Hollywood and New York and overseas, really trying to be an upstanding Christian man of integrity in a dark field in an industry that has a lot of darkness in it. So that was my hope and my efforts for a long time in my career. But COVID, J6, government depression, and just the acceleration of the technocratic tyranny that we're experiencing as Americans, just God brought me to a new direction and a new place. So I felt it was necessary to continue leading, continue fighting, especially for those who are not able to fight for themselves. And I didn't expect that to be in politics. It was in a prison cell that I really felt that call, especially as I contemplated the dire situation, specifically in our federal government and in Congress, particularly.
It's a little bit
And it
like
was,
Nineveh, where you
yes,
ran the other direction, and then God stuck you in a fish for 3 days, and then spit you out on the beach and said, "Nope, you're going that direction, west, not east, or east, not west."
yes, yeah, you picked up on that theme. And I've thought about the Jonah story as well. So I talk about the story of Joseph, which I see a lot of parallels in my life to that. And I'm not sure if God specifically called me into politics a long time ago and I rejected that in a Nineveh kind of way. I'm not sure. It didn't seem like that at the time. But perhaps he did put
Well,
me
a
in
lot
in
has
the
to
whale
do with
anyway.
you and I both being left UGs. We both left California for greener grass. Your new district, Florida 19, you've got Madison Cawthorn running again, which is interesting after all the things he said about how perverted DC is, and now he wants to go back, I guess. And a guy named James Oberweis that spent already about $1 million, and he's raised three. I think it's the largest raise in your campaign of 11. Yeah, 11 person, and that is a lot. What are the issues of Florida 19 looking into a post DeSantis Florida?
That's a great question. So folks should definitely visit us at johnstrand.com to join the fight in the Florida 19 race. I think it's very exciting no matter where you live in the country to support this race. And here's why. First of all, every vote in Congress is the same as every other vote in Congress. So every congressman impacts your life no matter what state you're from. So every race is important in that sense. And an opportunity to impact a congressional race where there is not an incumbent is huge. Incumbency is very difficult to overcome, and there's an open seat here. Also, I want to drive this home for anyone listening. This is so important for Americans to understand. We know that voting is important, although we still have a struggle just getting a lot of American citizens to vote and pay attention at all. And our nation will not survive if we do not reclaim civic duty and civic participation, because the whole premise of America is self-governance. You can't be self-governed if you're not participating in that process. So you have to vote. But also, if the war for America is truly waged at the primary election level, So if voters just show up in November, they've already lost. Like they have lost the war because it is fought in the trenches in the primaries. That's the only opportunity you have to select the right candidate. Otherwise, you end up essentially selecting the lesser of two evils, more or less in many cases. So the Florida 19 primary is very interesting. A lot of people running. Oberweis is a gentleman from Illinois who has managed a hedge fund of billions of dollars. So he's very, very wealthy. He's getting close to 80 years old. There's another congressman from New York that actually served a little time in prison, who is also very, very wealthy, and nearing 80 years old. So there are some older, wealthy, in my view, kind of older establishment type elements. And I definitely do not think that is going to serve Southwest Florida or America at this point. And I think the appetite in Southwest Florida, particularly, is for younger energy and for just a fierce, unapologetic commitment to the freedom and the foundational values that made America great and that made Florida the best state in the union. So DeSantis, of course, phenomenal, one of the best governors in modern history, and has set an incredible standard. So Byron Donalds is running for that seat in a primary with a few other challengers, and Byron is the congressman in my district, so he's opening that seat, and I'm running to fill it, to follow up his strong constitutional and conservative
And
principles.
Oberweis actually, he ran against Byron Donalds as well. He's an ice cream store chain owner, so hopefully he's got Maha, ingredients. But he had a taste of the swamp already. He had 20,000 previously uncounted mail-in ballots that were ultimately counted, and he lost after winning election night. There's a story of him and Byron Donalds actually going, I guess maybe districts next to each other, to victory parties, but then having to concede because of these 20,000. Do you have an election integrity strategy in case funny business goes on again in your election?
So in my election, we have really good elections in Florida, and that's a credit to Ron DeSantis. So that was not the case before he got into office, and he instituted a lot of serious reform, and it's been much more secure and reliable. Also, Republican registrations have exploded, so we're plus 1.5 million or so Republican registered voters in the state. And I'm in Florida 19, which is Collier and Lee County. So we have really excellent supervisor of elections and election processes. We will, of course, keep eyes on it because, transparency is critical. And I mean, just to answer your question, the election strategy, I think the general premise that, again, all Americans must be involved. It's your country, it's your government, and it's going to fall apart if you don't do your part to participate. And that certainly involves poll watchers and citizens being involved in the election process and understanding what precinct you're in, getting into your local GOP caucus or your Republican executive committee. So I'm elected as a precinct committeeman here in Collier County, and that's a big part of the process too. So we're the only candidate, Steve, that's collecting signatures on the ground, as I mentioned. Everyone else is buying their way back to Washington, and it is a crowded field, but I think we really offer and represent something fresh, exciting, and truly necessary at this moment because I think most people would easily agree, like the definition of insanity, it's electing the same rhinos cycle after cycle, yet expecting different results.
Yeah.
And you guys, I am so sick of the corruption and empty promises in Washington. I know you guys are too. That's the true reason I'm running for office, not because I want this or need this or anything else. I always tell Steve, I always tell people, why would you vote for John Strand over all the others, like 11 Republicans running in this field? Well, here's why. I'm not running to be somebody. I'm running to do something, and I've already proven that I can do it.
Yeah. And you only have to get 12% if they're going to stay in there at 11.
Yeah, it's a very winnable race because of how many people are running.
And no offense to them, and I don't wish them ill, but the two guys the Democrats just had a 80-year-old pass away in Congress. And so like you need somebody there that will be generational and actually do some good for a long period of time, assuming you want to stick around. You were off, I want to hit on this Jan 6 thing one more time at least.
Yeah.
So you mentioned yourself that you were offered this plea deal that would have kept you out of prison. When you rejected that, did you believe that you were innocent of legal wrongdoing or that the moral principle outweighed legal consequences, like Thoreau's civil disobedience? Like you had a right to do this, and so therefore they shouldn't even be bringing charges, but they did. Where did you draw the line?
That's a great question, and I've studied this a lot, thought about it a lot. Folks will say, are you trying to go to law school?" And I was like, "I was always wanted to be a lawyer, so maybe." But I've learned a lot about the law
Play one on
in the
TV.
process. In this process, so yes, I looked at the statutes and I reviewed the situation and I reviewed myself and my conduct and everything else. And I was thoroughly and am thoroughly convinced that I was completely innocent legally. So legally, or yes, I was innocent morally, and it was a moral atrocity what they did on January 6th. However, there were many legal atrocities as well. So, for example, the 20-year felony uh, that I was charged with, and that was the pretext for putting me in prison in isolation, abusing me, and all this other insanity. The title of the statute is tampering with a witness. Okay, so there was no witness, and I was not tampering. I mean, clearly that law has nothing to do with the context of what was going on, even if I had committed a legal infraction, which again I did not. But that law was completely ungermane. It was a wild abuse, and it was struck down uh, at the Supreme Court appropriately. But the other charges related to conduct that could have potentially occurred. So, disruptive and disorderly conduct in a Capitol building was a charge. Okay, I was at the Capitol building, but I didn't do anything disruptive or disorderly. I was just standing there in a crowd. So, our legal tradition in America requires that someone charged with a crime be the person that actually committed the crime. And you must satisfy all elements of a particular statute in order to be properly convicted as guilty of violating that. And there are multiple elements in any given statute. So I did not meet the elements of any of the statutes brought against me, even including the one referred to as trespass. And it's not called trespass. The charge is entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds. So a number of elements to that. You have to enter and remain. Remain would mean that you refuse to leave when asked to leave. So when I was asked to leave, it took a while because it was crazy, but eventually a cop came and said, "I think it's safe to get out. Could you make your way that direction and exit out of the east doors?" And I said, "Absolutely, thank you, sir," and did exactly that. I also didn't intentionally enter when I wasn't supposed to. There was no clear indication if anyone was supposed to enter or not. It was quite confusing. And then the doors open from the inside, which made it seem like maybe they are letting people walk in, right? But I was also pushed in by a huge crowd of people. And my main objective was just to make sure that my colleague wasn't trampled. So I had no intent to violate a law. I had no knowledge, specific knowledge that there was a law being violated if people walked in the doors at the point at which they were opened. And I certainly left when asked. And also, that statute is called entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds, the restriction being a designation that can only be given by the United States Secret Service. So that law was specifically written and passed by Congress to equip the Secret Service to designate buildings or areas as restricted during certain periods when their protectees, the president or otherwise, are on site. And so that restriction specifically applies to the Secret Service designating, and there was no such designation on January 6th. The Metropolitan Police Department claims they designated it, although they didn't do their proper diligence of even explaining and advising the public of that. But it doesn't matter. The statute refers to the Secret Service designating a restricted area, which did not happen. So again, you can get into the weeds, but that's what the law is about. I did not actually satisfy the elements of a single charge brought against me. I was completely innocent.
So critics say January 6th crossed a fundamental line, disrupting the peaceful transfer of power, our tradition 250 years now of peaceful transfer of power. I said many times we weren't even America while y'all were in jail. I mean, we suspended habeas corpus for the most part. It was not a country that we all knew founded on Moses and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Your supporters say it was civil disobedience. Is there a framework you use to determine, when breaking the law serves a higher purpose versus when it undermines democracy itself? Because if you're a lawmaker, you are now get to determine what a law is and what a law isn't. Do you have um, a determinant on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Henry David Thoreau was famous for writing on this. Civil Disobedience is his book, and he wrestles with that question, as does Martin Luther King Jr. I think the claim you mentioned of the critics on January 6th is pretty easy to debunk. The peaceful transfer of power doesn't happen on January 6th. That happens on January 20th. So again, their facts are wrong. And the classic, if you can't win on the law, win on the facts, and if you can't win on the facts, pound the table.
That's right.
So they love to pound and yell and scream, but they don't have the facts or the law on their side here. And
Well, just like when
also,
they said it was worse than Pearl Harbor and
oh
Vietnam
God,
and Civil War and everything we've ever been through, 9/11, but in reality, they didn't have their dates right.
yeah, and that is so reckless, irresponsible, and just despicable. It's really gross. I mean, it's like Jimmy Kimmel saying that line about the glow of an expectant widow of our great First Lady Melania Trump.
Awful.
Technically you can say whatever you want. That's what free speech is for. But we do have a free speech right and responsibility to call out and condemn terrible, awful speech for what it is. And that was disgusting. And
Especially on the FCC controlled airways. If he was
yes,
on
yes,
cable
there are
or
other
Fox or
other
not,
elements at play. And for anyone not on FCC airway that wants to say that January 6th was like Pearl Harbor, you're free to say that, and we're free, and it's our obligation to call that out as wrong and deplorable. It's just despicable. And what a disgrace to the memory of people who truly did suffer and die for the country in real terrorist attacks and tragedies and so forth. So again, I think it's really important to revive history and revive our founding principles and our values and remember what actually happened. The modern left and the Marxist movement has a very specific strategy, and you can study it over decades and decades. It's very obvious when you see the pattern. So this is not by accident. It is a plan and is being rinsed and repeated over and over. And a specific part of that plan is eroding history, because that's a mooring, it's an anchor to what actually happened and who we are and what we care about as people.
yeah.
So that's a really important thing
And
to
just
say.
yesterday, Hakeem Jeffries was invoking January 6th as being this terrible abuse of citizens against federal agents, whatnot. And that is, of course, rewriting of history. When you're out there knocking on doors, like you said, you're in the middle of, do your voters look at you as an ex-con or a patriot? What is the stigma of being a J6er? Like you mentioned, Thoreau's civil disobedience. Are you a hero, or did the smears of the Biden era stick to you?
Yeah, I would say yes and yes, right? So in Southwest Florida, it's very patriotic, very conservative, and very pro-America, and largely very pro-Trump. So this district and even the state generally is very clear-eyed on this point at the fraud and the government weaponization and corruption that was involved in January 6th. And so, yeah, I would say I get a lot of people, a large majority that are very supportive and thankful, actually, of what the J6ers represented and the courage that a lot of them had in trying to advocate for election integrity and push back on institutionalized government uh, fraud.
It's interesting because
So
I asked that because it consistently ranks the number one state with like over 150 individuals charged as of this year, 2026. It isn't over yet. So Florida seemed to be the MAGA target of this rogue judiciary for folks like you, and you weren't even there yet.
yes. Now, interestingly, I think a large number of J6ers also came from California and New York. So that would match up with the population size. And I mean, Florida, politically speaking, of course, is red and very conservative, whereas California and New York are run by Democrats, supermajorities. But I've realized there is no such thing as a blue state. Truly, there isn't. There are only red states abused by blue cities, and they are really badly abused by in California, New York, and some other states as well. But yeah, there's a lot of conservatives throughout this country. It's overwhelmingly red. I mean, we saw that in the last election. It really, truly was a landslide, and we're still caught in this really difficult battle where it's sort of it seems like it's a 50-50 struggle. It really isn't. I think America, broadly speaking, is at least 60% center right, reasonably conservative, and maybe even more, but it's certainly shifted that way.
That's the number
And
I use too, 60. Yeah.
Yeah, but the leftist progressive ideologies and that anger and hostility is so loud and focused and radicalized, and has collected a lot of institutionalized power, of course, in education and government,
And media. Yeah, exactly.
and media.
They get
Yeah,
their message out, the other side doesn't allow it.
I think we're, I mean, the media still has a huge advantage on the left, but there is alternative and conservative media that is thriving and is at least making a competitive attempt and a good challenge at trying to rebalance that. But I don't see that yet nearly as much in
How
education
does the
or
media in
government.
Florida treat you? Because here in Tennessee, it's a very liberal media, even though we're a very red state. It's almost as if they don't care about their customers or their viewers. How does Florida treat you, given your J6 background and your out-of-state background, for that matter?
Yeah. I would say mixed. So there's some positive media and there's plenty of middle of the road or leftist media that loves to smear or downplay the truth and the positives. So you definitely still have that fake news aspect of things, no matter what state you're in. Yeah, media is just really seemingly poisoned in that
Yeah,
sense
it's
to a
definitely
large
owned
degree.
and controlled by the left. So if elected, you have to swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution. The same document prosecutors said that you violated, even though they wrongly accused you, but that's what they said. How do you
Right.
reconcile that oath, given your conviction?
Well, the conviction was vacated, so
I
that's
mean, your
one
internal
thing.
convictions that
Oh, yeah, sorry. I mean,
they weaponized it against you, and you obviously stand on it as a document written in stone like the Ten Commandments. How do you go to DC and swear on that Constitution that they turned on you?
yeah, that would simply be a matter of remembering where we came from, what this document really means, and choosing to believe in it. Um, so you're actually bringing up a really important concept, Steve. Faith, so I'm a Christian, and that could mean a lot of things, but I think importantly, what it really means is that I understand that God is real. He is the ultimate source of authority. In fact, He is the source of our rights. As Americans, we talk about rights a lot, and that's very important. It's for good reason. Um, all humans are built with a desire to achieve good things and find a good path in life. I mean, that's sort of self-obvious, but it is true, and it didn't happen by accident. And there's a school of thought that says it does happen by accident, and we could discuss that another time. But it's foolishness. It leads to death and chaos and communism. To just wrap it up shortly, so clear-eyed as people, just recognizing the truth and reality of what's around us as a human race, we need to know, we need to recognize that there is a higher power, and that power is the source of our rights. That's why we know, believe, and fight for the truth that our rights don't come from government and government can never take them away. But government is perpetually trying to do that. The founding fathers knew this. They spoke at length and designed and architected a brilliant design of governance in order to account for that. So, Steve, something I tell people a lot, I ask them, do you think that the founding fathers had higher IQs than you and I do? I mean, we all talk about the founding fathers and revere them as we should. They were brilliant, educated, dedicated men. Um, but do they have higher IQs than we do? I don't think so. I think we have just as much IQ power. The superpower of the founding fathers was simply this: they recognized the truth of the human condition, that men are flawed, they are broken. Okay, but again, they were Christians, they were men of faith, they were men of the word, of the scripture, and the scripture informs us of this. Although, again, it's pretty self evident. You raise a baby and you realize, yeah, we're all flawed. It's just in there.
Mhm.
So they recognized that the human condition is conflict between good and evil, and that men tend towards evil. Um, but that we can't change that because that's the nature we have until God finishes his project. So they built a constitution, a framework that would channel human nature, which can't be changed, in a productive and positive direction. The lie of the left, the heart and soul of communism and Marxism, is the pursuit of utopia, which says we can become higher versions of ourselves and we can become perfect. And essentially, they want to become God because they reject the existence of God and his superior authority. So it sounds good when you spin it that way, but of course it's false. It never works out. And communism proves that over and over. So,
Well, I love how you're explaining basically that you never lost your love and roots in America and the Constitution, the patriotism, and our inalienable rights, which means God-given rights, versus
right,
the men and women who run the country during the 2020 to 2026 years that you were persecuted by man,
right.
not God or your faith in God. So you spent 4 months in solitary confinement, right? That's
Yeah,
crazy. Research shows this causes lasting psychological trauma. We all saw John McCain, who was a POW, and then he, had a second life as a senator, and it took a toll. Uh, so beyond your political narrative, not in a negative way, narrative meaning you're just, your platform.
sure.
What
Yeah.
parts of that experience in solitary change you in ways you're still processing?
That's a great question. It, I think it just slowed me down. It just deepened the resolve and deepened the commitment that I had to challenging and refining myself and chal pursuing the path that God has called me to. And so, I've always had passion and energy. I've always had excitement, and I was built on a foundation of biblical values, like I explained. So I've had a general worldview going in the right direction, but I'm a flawed human being. I've had mistakes, I've had frustrations, I've had a lot of failures that I still wrestle with in my life. And in a moment like that, in isolation, you're just overwhelmed, not only with the raw pain and intensity of just the awfulness that's happening to you, but psychologically, you're starting to hear the whispers of demonic voices. There were demons in that cell, without a question, because they were whispering that I could never overcome this, that I had a track of failure in my life that was going to get worse. I could never redeem what I could have and should have been as a human, as a man. So I think what I've learned is a deepening of my resolve to pursue humility, to pursue God's sovereignty in my life in terms of He's called me to my own agency. He's given me free will to make my own choices and given me a lot of heart, passion, and desires. But I need to continually surrender those to God and trust in Him for the greater path, the greater vision, because I can't see everything. I'm human. And that's what I was talking about, the importance of faith. So we have to believe it in order to see it. Vivek Ramaswamy, who I respect greatly, has been speaking powerfully on this idea of reclaiming what it means to be an American and where we're trying to go as an American nation. And he talks about how in our modern culture, we have this very, I got to see it to believe it mentality. And it's really quite the opposite of what God has called us to. And it's a, it's a, forgetting the word, but not a juxtaposition, but it's like a conundrum where we we struggle to believe in something if we can't see it because we have eyes and we have ears and we have these senses that we're built with and we're supposed to use them. But then counterintuitively, God's called us to recognize that everything we have comes from Him. He's greater. He sees more and farther than we do, and we're supposed to lean into that. And
Yeah.
that's where the faith aspect comes of simply surrendering that I'm not God, you are, and you have greater vision and a plan. And if I acknowledge that, you promise me, and this is written explicitly in the words, you can read it in the Bible. It's not like we're making this up. We know it and we can believe in it. He promises you lean into that. You will be blessed. You will be successful. You will prosper. You will walk in divine health as I've called you to. But the secret is understanding where it came from and understanding the call of God to turn to Him, to be in relationship, and to pursue that healthy growth trajectory. And I think that's what I learned at a deeper level in isolation and what I'm really excited about continuing to pursue in my life, whether it's running for Congress or anything else that God's called me to do.
Oh, that is beautiful. So you were sent to federal prison as a quote J6 prisoner, a
Yes.
specific category with, by your account, unique treatment. Do you believe the justice system can fairly adjudicate politically charged cases, or has that institution become too compromised to trust?
Yeah, great question. And you teed me up for one of my signature legislation as a congressman. So this doesn't get nearly enough attention, although Julie Kelly's done a great job of pointing this out, and she's one of the best journalists and voices on J6 and government weaponization. The DC District Court never should have existed, and it has become a total abomination. So I will immediately pursue defunding the DC District Court, and I want to see it abolished. Um, the the DC is, of course, the District of Columbia. The founding fathers intended for there to be a specific physical geographical zone to hold the seat of federal power so that no state was more powerful than another state because it encompassed the capital and the federal government entity. So they created a zone for it, but it was supposed to be a very defined zone. It is not supposed to be a city or a state or a residential entity. It's supposed to be a government entity. And so because it's grown, like everything with government grows, now it wields incredible power, and it is incredibly one-sided and biased. So, I researched when I was dealing with J6, 93% of residents of the District of Columbia were Biden-Harris voters. So you're going to tell me that's a jury of my peers in a highly politically charged case? Obviously, that's ludicrous. It's a bad joke. So there's no possible chance whatsoever that we can have fair, unbiased adjudication in the District of Columbia on anything that relates to anything slightly political. And of course, in DC, everything's political. So that district should not exist. That's easy. It's just an obvious solution to a problem there.
Interesting. Yes, that's true. So many nonviolent drug offenders serve decades without pardons or media attention. One of my JN6 guests, he moved from cell to cell over 2 years. I mean, what a nightmare on the family. And they sometimes didn't even know where he was. And he's now working on prison reform. God bless his mission. Should your case generate reform for all prisoners, or was your experience exceptional because of its political nature? And we're now in a different political season, so different players. Was there anything that was done to you that you would like to see never done to anybody else again, regardless of who's in office?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes, and an excellent question. So, and I would say the former. I would say my experience revealed a lot of issues that were existing prior to J6 and are very important to address, regardless of the political aspect or weaponized government. You also simply have corrupt government and inefficient bureaucratic government. And so those issues are very serious issues that are harming people and affecting a lot of lives. My experience in prison was mind-blowing. Again, please go to johnstrand.com/book and order that book and read it. Please share it. It could change the country. Honestly, Steve, the what is in this story is just so amazing and extraordinary. The conditions in prison and the criminal justice system, highly detailed what I went through. And it is mind-blowing. It's just shocking how corrupt prison is. It essentially is a criminal factory. So your tax dollars are going into a giant cottage industry to facilitate criminal behavior and to produce and traffic drugs and prostitution and every sort of vile behavior you can think of. So prison is not restraining that evil behavior. It is manufacturing, distributing, and facilitating it. It's ridiculous. So here's another policy proposal that might be interesting to people. I don't think it's radical at all. I think it's completely basic and normal. Again, go back to the Ten Commandments and just the basic outline of justice and liberty and how this whole thing is supposed to work. But there's nothing more sacred than life. Period. End of story. If life isn't sacred, nothing is, and all of this is a waste of time. And whoever has the strongest army wins, and that's it. There's no morality at that point.
Yeah, who needs
But if
the
you believe
oxygen
in,
and water if we don't have life,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
if you believe in right and wrong and freedom and justice, then that has to be predicated on the sanctity and dignity of life. Okay, so it's very basic. If someone commits murder, first degree murder, there's no debating this. There's no option. They must be executed. If you do not, if you cannot be pro-life and not be pro-capital punishment. That's a logical contradiction because you have invalidated the dignity of the human life that was murdered. And that's straight out of the Bible, but it's also just common sense. So if we returned our culture to a proper cultural expectation that murderers are executed. Again, this is not radical at all. This is how human life has worked for thousands of years. It's like you murder someone, yeah, you get killed. It's very basic, but basic things have a very powerful effect on things. So there would be a massive deterrent. Murder would plummet, and just the entire just the culture would start changing in a healthy direction. And also, the need for prison would be reduced. I'm not going to say it's going to go away entirely. I would like that, but it can be vastly reduced because most crimes should not result in a human being rotting in a cell for decades. That's a violation of the design of humans to be free. So if you commit a crime, you need to make restitution. You need to repay the debt you owe for the crime you committed, because that's what justice means, to recompense what you've done. And it also is necessary for the offender to be rehabilitated. That's the only way, is if they repay the debt, that actually repairs them as well as the person they've harmed. So if they've committed murder, like I said, end of story, capital punishment. But if they haven't murdered someone, then likely the crime they've committed has a financial cost to the victims. So that person needs to work, even if it's under servitude, but work until they repay that debt. So I think most crimes should be punished financially. I also think there's precedent for corporal punishment or beating. And again, it's surprisingly effective, has been for thousands of years.
Singapore does that, yeah. Just
Yeah.
spit on the
So
ground or throw gum on the sidewalk, you're gonna get
yeah, so there's
pain.
there's people can think it's old-fashioned, barbaric, or whatever else they want to call it, but you know what? It's biblical, it's common sense, and it works. What's not biblical and what doesn't work is locking people up for decades in a crime factory that turns them into drug traffickers and everything else that you can think of that's disgusting. So yeah, massive criminal justice reform is absolutely essential in my view, and certainly with my experience. So I think the BOP should be abolished. That's the Bureau of Prisons at the federal level. That's because I think the federal government does far too many things that they have no business doing whatsoever. That should be a state related issue. So state prisons, I think, have a place, and certainly county jails are necessary. But federal prison, I don't see why that should really exist at all, to be honest with you.
Interesting. That would be amazing. I'm almost out of time with you, and I gotta go knock those doors. But
Yes, I
and
do.
thank you for the time thus far. But America's Frontline Doctors, where you served as spokesman, how has that experience informed your approach to scientific expertise, public health, and institutional credibility? We've got a number two of Fauci going in front of the courts now, and that's a big deal. He might flip. So, how do you feel about your experience from America's Frontline Doctors, and what is that?
Yeah, it was a tremendous blessing for me to have that experience. I actually still work as the creative director for America's Frontline Doctors and also goldcare.com, which is a revolutionary medical freedom platform that we are going to change the way medicine is approached and practiced throughout the world. So definitely check that out. America's Frontline Doctors has done God's work, really important work since the COVID era, to shatter the propaganda and to provide pathways for people to access early treatment. It's saved thousands of lives. We know that from testimonials and many other evidence. So America's Frontline Doctors had a power influence in that period, and we continue to operate in the realm of public education and advocacy for medical freedom and truth and validity in the scientific fields. So COVID, of course, really blew apart the whole expert concept or model and exposed a lot of corruption and rot in our institutions at every level, but certainly in science and health. So people need to be very skeptical of the expert label. Also, people have been clamoring, as they should, for accountability and justice in a number of areas, including the medical. Fauci is a criminal, he should be executed, because I don't really believe in long-term prison. If you throw him in there for 50 years, that would work too. But I am not ashamed to say that I think there's no doubt that Anthony Fauci is a traitorous criminal that is guilty and responsible for the deaths of many, many people, and he should be publicly executed. That would be real justice, and I think it would be powerfully healing for the nation. Again, running for Congress at johnstrand.com, and I have no problem saying that because it's the truth. So Frontline Doctors did amazing work and gave me an opportunity to interact with a lot of amazing doctors and lawyers who not only are legitimate experts in their fields of study and practice, but also are committed patriots who understand, again, the foundational truths, the fundamentals that supersede everything else. There is a God and you're not him. Your rights come from God and no government can take them away. And your inalienable right is to be informed, is to have informed consent in any medical procedure or environment, that no one can force a drug or a procedure on you. That's a violation of your personal sovereignty, and that is sacrosanct. So we must continue to advocate for that. I do love and support what Secretary Bobby Kennedy's doing in HHS. He has the right heart and he's actually very smart and very effective and he's doing some great work there. But there is a lot of work to be done. And I think a lot of those institutions need to be much further reduced or abolished and eliminated. That's my view, because again, the federal government is doing 90% more than what it should be doing in the founders model.
Yeah, even constitutionally. Your
Yes.
book is titled Patriot Plea. It's right there
Yes.
over your shoulder. But patriotism, it's become contested, weaponized by both sides. What is a patriot? Is it possible to reclaim that word, maybe for the Republican Party? I mean, it's very funny to me that if you wear a American flag t-shirt like I am right now, you pretty much know you're a Republican. Or has its meaning become too fractured to unite people?
Good question. I will never yield or surrender the truth and power of what is good to the left, which is very smart and effective in their strategy of trying to confuse, dilute, and hijack the meaning of words and powerful concepts. So I will never surrender it. We must reclaim patriotism. We must reclaim the Republic. That's our mission for Florida 19 at johnstrand.com. And we must understand what patriotism and what citizenship actually is. We have to dig into that. We have to teach our children. I was homeschooled. I think it's the secret to saving the country. The government is not supposed to be in the business of running schools. That's not their role. So government schools are a huge problem. But however you teach your children, please impart to them the truth and the importance of knowing what it means to be an American citizen and what patriotism properly means. Patriotism comes from the root word pater. It's Latin, means father. So a patriot is a father figure, meaning he has provision for those he's responsible to care for. He provides their needs, and provision means vision to look ahead at what's coming next, not just reacting in the moment to what's directly in front of you. That's what a patriot is. A patriot loves and cares for their nation as a father does his children. He has vested interest and responsibility. He is the protector. He's the final authority. So as citizens of America, as patriots, it's our country. It's our government. We are the final authority. That actually is true and necessary. And we've abdicated it as a society for close to a century, slowly but surely. Charlie Kirk always said things happen slowly until they happen suddenly.
Yeah.
So slowly, slowly, we've been abdicating our duty as patriots, as citizens who invest and have stewardship responsibility of the government and everything else in the country, because it's our
That's
country.
the rise of the NGOs where all the money
And
is, more
yes,
than most
yes,
countries out there. GDP.
exactly right. The NGO industrial complex must be dismantled. It's another priority of mine running for Congress in Florida 19. And a lot of hard work. We got to roll up our sleeves and get to it. But you guys can join the fight at johnstrand.com, and everyone can find a place to participate in their government, even if they're not running for office. We all have a role to play in the government.
Okay, last question, I'll let you go. So looking back 10 years from now, what would need to be true personally, politically, and for the country of America for you to feel that your suffering was worth it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. The truth of it is that my suffering was redeemed through the blood of Jesus Christ. And so it is worth it, period. Nothing that any other human could do or all humans could do will ever change that. And that's the ultimate anchor that allowed me to survive everything I did in prison. That's the ultimate anchor that even led me down the path where I would have been arrested in the first place. If I didn't have those values and that firm belief and that faith, I certainly would not have rejected the plea deal and sent myself on this trail. So I do genuinely hope so sincerely, and I am optimistic, and I believe in the goodness and faith and beauty and power of the American people in this nation. I believe in the American experiment of liberty. And I'm calling my Christian brothers and sisters to rise up and re-engage in what I call the red pill revolution. So I talk about that in Patriot Plea. And so I am optimistic. I believe we can ignite a revival in this country, in the church and in the government and in this country. And that's what I'm going to believe. That's what I'm going to fight for. But as our great founding father said, duty is ours, results are God's.
Oh, well said. And thank you for not slinking away into the shadows and into obscurity, but actually getting back into the arena a second time. Our third time for you. So tell our listeners where they can find out more about you, maybe social media, join your campaign, donate, of course, buy your book, anything you want to tell us.
Yes, please go to johnstrand.com. And I am telling folks just $26 can win 2026, one patriot at a time. So everyone can afford $26 if they want to. That's not too much. But if we get everyone to do $26, we'll ignite fundraising to actually get us over the hump to win this campaign. We're up against guys that have raised $3+ million. And I truly believe we can win the race with less than $3 million. But we do have to raise several $100,000 these next couple of months. And so we're working hard to do that. Everyone can donate whatever they're willing to, and it makes a real difference. And you find that at johnstrand.com. If you go to johnstrand.com/book, you'll find Patriot Plea. We urge you to order that and share it with your friends. I actually recorded the audiobook myself. So there's a book and an audio version, and it is an incredible, amazing story. And I think really would excite and ignite patriotism and just a recommitment to who America is, what America is all about, and how we get back to making this the greatest country in the world.
I can't wait to get my signed copy in person. All right.
Yes,
Well, thank
sir.
you again for your time. Good luck on the campaign. Hang on, folks. I will be right back.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Thanks for coming back. That's it for this episode. Thank you, John Strand, for not once, but twice being the man Teddy Roosevelt called the man in the arena. He said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Or, as Maximus Decimus Meridius said in the most iconic quote from Gladiator back in 2000, "What we do in life echoes in eternity, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next." Another good one is, "If you want a friend in Washington, get a dog." President Harry S. Truman. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it around. We only grow with your help, and still ad-free. Peace in our time and glory to God.
Will you remove your helmet and tell me your name?
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Hi, my name is John Strand, and I was at the Capitol on January 6. The events of that day, unfortunately, have been severely misrepresented by many people with various motives. Conflicting views and reports have led to confusion, hatred, and division in our nation. While I can't correct all of that here, what I can do is give an honest and accurate account of my own thoughts, intentions, and actions during the course of my entire journey through the Capitol building that day. And you don't have to take my word for it, because it's all on video, as you'll see. I am certain that my actions were lawful and reasonable to the best of my knowledge and ability at the time they occurred, given my responsibility to protect a scheduled speaker. And I know that I never had any mens rea, or the criminal mind, of any intention to break the law or act inappropriately at any point. This is why I refused the government's plea, and why I continue to maintain my innocence as I pursue an appeal of all convictions. After attending the morning event at the Ellipse, we slowly made our way through the massive crowds towards the Capitol. At this point, my client had attempted to reach an elevated vantage point atop the steps, so she could try and gain the attention of bystanders to give her speech, as she was scheduled to do that day. We were unable to reach a balcony position, and the crowd shifted toward the Columbus store entrance, pushing us in that direction. Because our plan had always been for Dr. Gold to give her speech outside the Capitol, as the speech permit allowed, the thought of going inside the building never even occurred to me. I had assumed with all the various speeches and rally activity that the Capitol would have little, if any, business going on that afternoon. And how did anyone get in there? It was obvious to me standing on the steps that the crowd would never be able to open the formidable Columbus doors by force. But as shown in a closed-circuit television recording inside the Capitol, the doors were opened from the inside. I was shocked during my trial when the prosecutor overtly tried to deceive the jury by showing them this clip and telling them the uncovered white hand waving towards the door was my hand, convincing the jury that I was an aggressive member of a mob and trying to attack the entrance. But I was wearing black gloves the entire day, which the prosecutor knew, or should have known, making this an obvious falsehood. The truth is, I was just stuck there in what had become a packed and energetic crowd. I clearly remember wishing I could extricate Dr. Gold from that crowd, but that was impossible. It was very dense, as this video clearly demonstrates. In fact, it was so dense that when a police officer, who we couldn't see at first because he was behind a corner, became lightheaded and suddenly appeared from around the corner, my client was startled. The officer stumbled to our left as we were being pushed forward towards the doorway. He fell into the crowd and was immediately in the middle of a circle of people who quickly lifted him back to his feet. It happened very quickly, and he was surrounded by others so fast that we never had time to react. We certainly did not ignore or walk past someone that we knew to be injured, as the government maliciously claims. As this officer passed by and fell, I instinctively caught hold of my client in response to the surrounding crowd suddenly shifting, as you can see in this photo. What you can't see in this photo is the officer being assaulted, because he wasn't. The video clearly shows the officer simply fell down, and the crowd immediately reached down to assist him, pulling him back to his feet and stabilizing him as he regained his breath, while bystanders yelled, "Get him up!" But once again, the prosecutor misrepresented this and made a false claim that the officer was assaulted in front of us. This is not true, and it's a very concerning false accusation. We later realized just how blatant this falsehood was after reading the officer's statement given to the FBI only a few days after the event. Quote, Pollitt stated that he then blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he was no longer in the door foyer area and still had possession of his baton. Pollitt did not seek medical attention. This false suggestion of assault was further debunked by the FBI special agent who reviewed it, confirming the officer simply fell, and, quote, there was not enough to charge assault. Now, prior to this, the crowd was very loud and excited, but I didn't detect anger or violence until suddenly a flashbang exploded, panicking the crowd, who became agitated by the noise and smoke as they were further provoked.
It's a long way to Nashville from that Napa Valley vine. Put me on a road less traveled. Lord, now I know why. God knew I'd get there in His perfect time.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.